Welcome to the Rewild Gear Podcast. Modern life, society, and responsibilities have domesticated us. But now it's time to rediscover your adventurous side. Whether that's camping, hiking, hunting, fishing, or just spending time in the great outdoors, this is the podcast for you. Join us as we get back to the wilderness and rewild. Welcome to the Rewild Gear Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Spears, and I'm here today with John Roulac. John is a hemp innovator, serial entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist, writer, and champion of regenerative agriculture, which is what we're going to be talking about today. As the founder of the organic superfoods brand Nutiva, he has sourced and formulated close to $1 billion in retail sales of organic superfoods over the past 20 years. John is an executive producer of the regenerative agriculture film Kiss the Ground, which was narrated by Woody Harrelson and featured on Netflix, and a great documentary, I might add. He is an investor, supporter, and advisor to various companies and organizations in the better for you and the planet sector, which is something that we all need more of. Over his career, John has founded 6 nonprofit organizations, including Great Plains Regeneration and GMOInside. His passionate hemp advocacy brought him to sue the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency. And this long legal battle culminated in a historic 2004 federal court victory to keep hemp foods legal. He is a pioneer of the modern home composting movement and has authored 4 books on hemp and composting. John, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here today.
Thanks for inviting me, Seth. Good to be here.
Totally. Well, I really want to dig in today on your story and about what you're doing as far as conservation and regenerative agriculture and all of that. That's something that we're super passionate about, and really think that that's so needed today, as you think so too. Otherwise, you wouldn't be involved in all the work that you're doing. But I'd like to dig into your story first. How did you get to where you are today? Just give us a little bit of background about how you got started and how you got into this.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think we all know that the environment that we grow up in impacts humans, impacts animals, and I had a very unusual background where I was born and raised in Southern California, like 8-9 miles from downtown LA in the grew up in the 60s. It's very, very smoggy, hard to breathe. You go play outside for 2-3 hours, you come back home and your lungs would be in pain because of so much smog. And then at the same time, because I was very lucky, my parents decided to buy like remote islands up against Canada and Washington State, and then also off of Vancouver Island. So I'd spent a couple months on places that had no running water, no electricity, beautiful nature, and spending time around big, beautiful trees and the tide pools, and then 10 months a year in a more polluted environment. So that back and forth really impacted me. And then when I was around 20. Some unidentified truck driver dumped nuclear waste 9 miles from my house.
Oh,
and that was kind of like the little thing that set me off. Like, how could that happen? So I became an environmentalist and saying, why are these corporations destroying our planet and doing, pollution and all these things? Because it was easy to blame corporations. And then after a year or two, I was like, what are the products I'm buying? Am I driving a car? What are the things how am I contributing? So then I looked at how do we live in a more ecological way? that was 40 years ago, and in the 1980s, and here we are in 2021, and a lot of good things have happened, but also we've accelerated the destruction of biodiversity. Climate change is getting more intense, losing a lot of our topsoil. And so there's a real opportunity for people to look at how are we going to create the next couple decades. So that's a little about me. And then also I was very interested in entrepreneurship. I had 4 businesses by the time I was 14.
Wow.
And including 2 food businesses, picking blackberries, selling door to door, and also a crab business, catching crabs and selling them to tourists, in the boat docks and stuff. So that's a little of how I've gotten here.
Got it. So nature and the environment, that's always been really important to you from a very young age.
Yeah, definitely. And for some reason, I started reading the Wall Street Journal every day, as a young man at 14. My dad did. by the time I was 25, I was like, why am I reading the Wall Street Journal every day? This is kind of strange. Like, I'm an environmentalist. These corporations are, look what they're all doing.
Mhm.
But then, as you know, I founded Nutiva, and
Yeah.
understanding how corporations work is very important because business is so impactful. And so I was able to kind of blend my interest in the environment and nature and health. Health is a very important thing for me. I love to play basketball, and
Ah,
I still play basketball at my age, which not a lot of people play basketball at 62. But I'm out there running the court and throwing people down on the ground, if I'm wrestling for the ball still. So,
there you go.
yeah.
John, what's your definition of an environmentalist?
Wow, I could spend a long time on that. Sadly, today, I'll tell you what it isn't. Sadly, today, the modern environmental movement has been defanged. What a lot of people don't understand, but back in the 1980s, corporations realized there was this thing called the environmental movement. Essentially, they just captured. So the largest environmental organizations today are funded primarily by people who made a lot of the money on Wall Street or old line, foundations. And they basically say oil and gas is bad, solar and wind is good,
Mhm.
full stop. That's the environmental program for America. That's what the Sierra Club, that's what 350.org, that's what a lot of these groups, that's what they send out in their newsletters, that's what they do in their blogs. And they never seem to get to like, oh, maybe we need to protect nature. Maybe we need to restore nature. Maybe regenerative agriculture could be part of it. Maybe we need to listen to indigenous cultures and their traditions of taking care. They don't even see themselves, nature, they don't even call it nature. There's just earth and we're part of it. And to spray pesticides and using toxic chemicals, it's like, why? Of course, we know reasons why, now because it's part of industrial agriculture. But so an environment, yeah, money, and also people just think it's the way it is. One thing I've learned more and more, we're creatures of habit.
Yes.
It's like, notice how like there might be a beautiful mountain and you hike this trail and there's other trails, but you really enjoy that trail and you go there and maybe you go to the other one. And it's like, it's just, no matter who we are, we tend to get in that comfort zone. So, and maybe what definition of environmentalist is to point out some uncomfortable truths
Mhm.
and how do we live in a more balanced way to not destroy the planet. So yeah, but there's a lot of small NGOs that are working, but they don't necessarily get the funding.
How would you differentiate between, say, an environmental organization and a conservation organization, or the difference in understanding between those two terms?
Right. Conservation organizations, and they'll look to protect large areas of ecosystems, and so they may purchase it or they may do land, like development rights or things, and that's really changing too. Though, interestingly, the Audubon Society is now promoting the beneficial uses of holistic grazing with cows
Hmm.
to restore land. So in the past, you see, the challenge is as us Europeans that arrived in America in 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, depending on when we arrived, we looked at nature as this untamed. It was just like, and there was these heathens, indigenous people that were living there, and they weren't doing anything, and so some of the formation of the conservation groups is we're just going to buy this land and we're going to set it aside. And we're not going to do anything with it. But that's not how indigenous cultures. So indigenous cultures were using fire. They were sculpting. They were doing different things, and so just putting like if you go to Africa today, if you go like the parks. And see, this is an example, and this is taught. This is what environmentalists and a lot of conservation groups. If you go to the parks in Africa, they put fences around it, and they're not necessarily working with nature. It becomes a brittle system. So back when there was more, like in North America, if there was more buffalo, the constantly were moving, through because of the threat of people, of hunters, of wolves, etc. And so you need that constant moving and that shaping also with fire. So we need to get beyond this. That man is the problem. More is man. It's not necessarily even management, but like we've been bad, poor managers. We can be better managers. But of course, indigenous people would think like managers is like, that's a European construct too. But we need to learn. We're all connected. So you can see this is not like a black or white.
Yeah. I'm finding that a lot of things in life are like that. We kind of grow up with this tradition or this construct of there's good and bad or right and wrong or black and white. But there's so many elements of gray within that, and that it really depends on the perspective that you're coming from, and so many different avenues there. And it seems like that is throughout life, whether that's in business or in nature or so many different things.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I try to work on is beginner's mind, is to keep that, because what I as just looking like my environmental career and business career of 40 years, what I thought was true 20 years ago, I was adamant about, and then it was just like, wow. But I'm open to I want to be open to learning and hearing. And that's really important so we can evolve. And as we get more information and be able to set aside our ego and our attachments to, quote, being right.
Yeah, 100% there. And it seems like a lot of the environmental and conservation organizations that are around, they get so attached into a very linear way of thinking that, okay, this is how we do it, and we're only going to focus on this thing. But it's like they're so focused on this one avenue of thinking and what their objective is, that they lose sight of the bigger picture at times, and how we holistically we all have to work together and have a symbiotic relationship, not man versus nature, not nature versus man, but it's all of us together, because we're all part of this greater ecosystem on the planet.
Exactly. Yeah. But I like to say, we grow up in a society where we walk into a square room and you sit at a square desk, and you're giving a piece of information, a tablet, a book,
Hmm.
a square book or a rectangular book, and you're given the truth.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective.
Very linear, and uh, and and really, like there's two ways to think about education. One is the student is a cup, and the master and the smart person, the older person, pours the information into the cup, and so then the cup is full and has the student is learning. Or is the student like a candle, and the purpose of the teacher is to light that candle, and then the student has that opportunity to shine in its own or her own unique way.
Yeah, that's a very unique perspective on it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
John, tell me about the Great Plains Regeneration Initiative. How did that get started?
Yeah, thanks for asking about the Great Plains Regeneration. So last fall, as the Kiss the Ground film, which I had the idea to do the film in 2013, and met the filmmakers Josh and Rebecca, and of course knew some of the folks from Kiss the Ground, the NGO, and really was, how do we tell the story about regenerative agriculture? Fast forward, 7 years later, the film was just coming out, and I thought, well, now this film is really going to have some really great impact on educating people, and it's on Netflix, and we have almost 10 million people downloading the trailer, so lots of people seeing the film. So given that regenerative agriculture, thinking back last fall, was going to have kind of its day in the sun, more people would be aware of it and would be wanting to learn more about it. So I said, well, what can I do? How can I contribute, and what's next? So I thought, I was talking to some folks including Jess and Ned and Gail Fuller, who live in Kansas. What about if we put the tip of the spear of regenerative agriculture right in the middle of the country of the U.S.?
Mm-hmm.
And then we decided to come up with the word Great Plains, the name Great Plains Regeneration. And the Great Plains goes all the way from Texas to Canada, but our initial focus is kind of Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma, and then kind of expanding out from there. So the idea is that there's a lot of economic, environmental, social, geological reasons why it's so important. There's lots and lots of farms and ranches. There's areas where it's very dry. There's areas where it gets lots of rainfall. There's some areas where there's row crops. There's some areas where there's grasslands. There's lots of confined animal feedlots. There's lots of concern about watersheds. There's indigenous tribes. There's areas where there had great injustices, like the Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, destruction and killing in 1921. So there's a lot to work with there. So that's what came up, and it's essentially a group that works with large and small stakeholders around how we can advance regenerative agriculture. For example, this morning I was talking to a team from one of the largest agriculture companies, in North America, and they like all of us personally realize that we have a very short window, that the opportunity to create an agricultural system, an economic system, a social movement around soil health makes so much sense. It makes sense for the farmer. It makes sense for the large corporations, that any food company, small or large, just like you want a continuous supply chain. Do you think these big corporations, you don't think they understand that in 10 or 15 years that they're not going to be able to just order up 1,000 elevators of particular crops because of how we're growing our food? They know we're losing 1% to 2% of winged insects a year.
Wow.
We have a recent scientific report came out last month that climate change and biodiversity, it's not one or the other. They're tied at the hip. They're both very important. But again, the environmental organizations, the COP, the conventions on climate change, the climate advisors, all these groups, they've just been focusing on climate change and not biodiversity. It's so dysfunctional that at COP21, the Paris Accord, soils and oceans were banned from the discussions. They were written off. You couldn't even discuss it.
Wow.
They only want to talk about smokestacks. And there's this joke, like the G7 right now, that they're having a meeting, and there are people flying on private jets, and they're burning, and they're watching jets in the sky burning all sorts of things, like kind of like some sort of sky war exercise, and yet they want to blame the cows. And that's a whole other discussion we could come back to on the issue around cows and ultra processed factory meat, and how that ties into a long time campaign around sugar and carbs is bad, meat is, sugar and carbs, don't pay attention to that and blame meat. But back to Great Plains Regeneration. So we've been doing like Farmer Friday Zoom calls. We're part of one of our members is the Fuller Field School. So we have events there. We're having a fundraiser in Lawrence, Kansas, August 21st. People can come to and learn about this. We're working with the Watershed Organization, Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams, and we kind of bring where the farmers and ranchers are, and so we and then we're also working on market development as well. How do farmers get more value out of the crops that they're growing? So we're looking at in grains and wheat and things like that, and encouraging holistic grazing of animals and cover crops and mimicking nature, and so it's fun stuff, and a lot of opportunity there.
So I'd love to dig into this a little bit more. There's a lot of paths we can go down here right now. So one of the things, one of the big arguments that you hear as far as just environmentalism goes, as far as carbon sequestering, and one of the reasons they say that cows are bad because of all the carbon that they're putting out, the methane and everything. However, bison are very, very similar to cattle. And there was anywhere between 30 and 60 million, maybe as many as 80 million bison that were roaming North America before we pretty much wiped them out. And so the amount of methane and carbon that they were off-putting for millennia was unprecedented. So I don't totally buy that argument when it comes to climate change and things like that. So would you like to weigh in there?
Yes. First off, the buffalo are 2 to 3 times the size of a lot of the cows.
Mm-hmm.
Also, remember, methane only has that. It basically goes away after 12 years. So it's just cycling. So if you have 100 million cows, there's no more methane, this year than there was, 8 years ago, et cetera. The number one contributor to methane is, fracking and natural gas, which they're replacing. Look, if we were really, anti, methane, we wouldn't be replacing coal with all this natural gas. We would be doing other things. Remember, there's very little effort. And rice, like you don't hear anybody wanting to ban rice, or rice emits way more methane than cows.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We can also grow rice in a different way, SRI rice that doesn't. So the thing that's much worse, and that you'll notice is never in the conversation, is the NOx and NOx.
What is that?
And exactly. Like here, you consider yourself someone who is, very interested in agriculture and food, and most people don't even know it. It's nitric oxide, and it's released from chemical fertilizer plants. It's 380 times more impactful than CO2. 380 times.
Wow.
But if you read an article in the New York Times, Bloomberg, The Guardian, Sierra Club, 350.org, NRDC, maybe not NRCC, they've actually doing, but EDF, a lot of these groups, NRDC now just did some good work on regenerative ag actually, but they never mention this word. Same way with WRI, World Resource Institute, and the fastest growing greenhouse gas in the world today, NOx, nitric oxides. And it's very bad, and regenerative agriculture can reduce or eliminate. Matter of fact, I was speaking to one of the farmers that I know that's in eastern Colorado. He grows about 4,500 acres of wheat, so pretty large size farmer. He's conventional, not certified organic. This year, he won't use one drop of synthetic fertilizer, which is what they basically frack natural gas to make synthetic fertilizers, and it also pollutes the ocean. It's and the way he's doing that is integrating cattle. So I like to say the future of plant-based is animal-based. So where we're going to produce all of these row crops, whether it's from corn or peas or soy or canola, for plant-based foods, is the farmers themselves are integrating cattle. So they say, because the cattle can replace the chemical fertilizers. But you see, there is a social and economic and control of the very large, powerful organizations such as the Gates Foundation, such as Monsanto, such as Bayer, such as the World Economic Foundation, such as the World Resource Institute, and such as the Sierra Club. And some of them, like the Sierra Club, they don't even really know they're inside the game. They just know that they shouldn't, that they don't really talk too much about, the cows are kind of bad because, they overgraze. It's not, like cows can definitely overgraze and and they can do damage that way. But when you move them and mimic like the bison herds, and, more and more ranchers are starting to do that. And that's why the National Audubon Society is working with ranchers and they actually you get more habitat, you get more bird life when they do that, because the cows are only there for a period of time, the grass grows, and then they leave. and then they come back, they eat some more of the grass. So you have a deeper root system, and it holds more water and more carbon. But the way that this, and I've really been learning about this more, and this is this connection between the anti-meat and the chemical, industrial complex is it's such a brilliant strategy. It's such a brilliant strategy that it gets me effing depressed sometimes of how good it is and how hard it is to combat.
Yeah.
So it started back when it started as a trend when it wasn't even conceived of by the people now who are working in it. So in the 1960s and 50s and 70s, people are going, Americans are getting, and Americans, there's heart disease, and in the 70s, people are getting overweight. Who do we blame? Is it sugar? Eating lots of sugar? Is it all the empty carbs and the junk food? No. Saturated fat. And the cigarette scientists, the same people who did the cigarettes, they said, oh, let's do studies and we'll blame meat and butter and let's sell margarine. So they were able to capitalize on a business and sell margarine. They got everybody eating margarine, trans fat margarine, no less. And everybody was eating. Luckily, my parents said, my mom's, no, I'm not going to get margarine. My uncle was a doctor. He got the margarine. Their family got the margarine, but not me. So they got along that going. And then the vegetarians started picking up, oh, meat is bad. And that didn't really matter in the 90s. Some people, if you don't, it's nothing wrong with I was a vegetarian for 15 years, nothing wrong with being a vegetarian. But then they started to go, wow, not only is meat maybe not healthy for you, they're saying, but we should get rid of cows altogether. We should get rid of all of animal agriculture. And then Monsanto and Bayer, basically the forebearers of the companies that made the chemicals and sprayed, in Auschwitz and killed 6 million Jews, the companies that made those chemicals that declared war on nature in the 1940s to now not spray chemicals on people. Now we would spray it on nature and kill bugs. So they shifted over. There's a book called War on Bugs. That's a great, that would be a great person. Will, he's one of my mentors to interview. So they took that, but now they go, oh, we can now split we can take the whole good food movement and we can split it in half and we can have them fight against each other. So I have friends of mine who are very good friends of mine that now don't like me. I am evil. I am bad. I am talking about biodiversity and how cows are better than chemical plants. And they're convinced that cows are the enemy, that essentially the vegan vegetarian movement hates cows. They think they're the problem. They have a hatred towards them. Now they'll say no, but you know what would happen to all the cows if no one was taking care of them? They would all just die. I mean, it's like
it starved to death.
And I get, the idea that you don't have to take a knife and kill an animal, that seems like on a surface, like if we could just not do that, wouldn't that be better? Like I get the, the psychological and the, I get that. But we have evolved on this planet through the interaction between animals and humans. And essentially the animals, if we get rid of animals, we have to replace them with a fertility. And the fertility, when you don't have animals, just like that wheat farmer, his fertility was petrochemicals and destroying the environment, destroying the oceans. So he's bringing cattle back and now he doesn't have to use those chemicals. And it's safer for people. It's more nutrient dense. So it's a hard, it's like the cows, they have 2 years, really good years, and then one bad day, and so it's a brilliant strategy by dividing up this plant, vegans, and there's billionaire vegans and they're funding organizations. There's a group called GFI, Good Food Institute. Their annual budget is $18 million a year.
Wow.
and they basically putting out false information. And the chemical companies realize if they can just blame the cows, they can just keep growing GMO corn. Get rid of the cow. They don't need the middleman anymore. They just take GMO corn and they send it to industrial factories where they have put in these vats, and they take genetically modified yeast and bacteria, and then they just create these fake food, and it's very unhealthy for you. People haven't even like really done any and they're just starting to do analysis on what it eats when you eat an Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat. Eating it now and then is it's nothing. Okay, you want to do that. It's just like you have a bag of potato chips, right? We're not going to die. Nobody needs to be perfect, right?
Sure.
So, but it's an interesting time, and if you look back 10 years ago and you looked at where the discussion was, and you look 5 years ago, and you look at today at the anti-meat and the anti-cow and this pro-plant-based, it's at a very rapid clip. And there's a potential that Gates and Monsanto and the vegans will win. And they are now looking to ban meats, ban cows, and make it restrictive so ranchers can't raise cows. They're looking to ban meat on menus. They're gaining momentum because they have a whole army of people who are true believers, and they have the billionaires that are backing them, that are going all making money in the bank, like Bill Gates and Monsanto. It's and Wall Street now is endorsing plant-based. But so it's very interesting times. There's some links that I'll some recent articles and podcasts that I'd like for you to check out, and we can share so people can listen to this. And it's easy when you dive down into it, you go, wow, this is rather Orwellian.
Yeah. As we get into that, it seems like, there's a saying about strange bedfellows, right? And how you have these big multinational corporations, say Monsanto, that are, and you have like people who tie into an ideology, whether that's being a vegetarian or vegan. And primarily the reason that they want to do that, vegan more so than vegetarian, I think, is for the planet, for environmental reasons, or because they love animals or things like that, as opposed to vegetarian, which to me, I think most of them, it's for health reasons. So I want to make that distinction there. And, I'm generalizing, but as a whole, I think that's probably a good analysis of the difference between the two. So what's interesting to me is that you have this whole community and philosophy of vegans who meat is bad. You got to protect the animals. It's so inhumane to kill them and eat them, even though nature and animals are eating each other all the time and it's part of the life cycle. But then they want everything plant-based, but in order to grow that many plants and everything, you do have to spray, you do Roundup ready seeds and everything and all of that. And all of the runoff from what they're spraying is going into our waterways and everything. And it's totally terrible for the environment and for our health. So it seems to me like there's this disconnect that a lot of people are missing. Do you have any thoughts on why that is, or why those correlations are not put together?
Well, it's almost like the vegan movement has become a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I was a vegetarian. I wasn't necessarily a strict vegan, but I said, eating meat was bad, and we could, we can grow more crops and we have to feed a lot more people. But what we need to do, though, is we need to stop the confined animal feedlots. And we need to convert the croplands that we're growing to feed the cows, and we need to return that back to pasture land, because that work we can sequester the carbon. And we think we can depend on regular amounts of rainfall and the right amount of heat, and we're realizing that any country that relies on that for their food system, that's, notice how all those civilizations died out. Like look at 1200, and there was no hint of them, 5 years later, crop failures, etc. So if we could convert the Great Plains, much of it back to grasslands, still growing some crops, but in where we're growing the crops, the cattle are involved, that then if it's very dry or we don't have the right weather to grow a bunch of crops that year, at least there's going to be food being produced, and the land is going to be regenerating. So, and we actually need more cows in the land, not less. And a lot of these holistic grazing can increase the amount of cows per hectare of land by 1, 2, 3, 4 times versus multiple times by restoring the grassland. And it's a little complex for people to understand. So that's one of the things. But back to your question, I feel in today's society that there's a real disconnect. We have a very, families move all over the country. There's not a real great, philosophy about how to create a better world. It's kind of dog eat dog, survival, the fittest, a lot of discrimination, racial discrimination, a lot of wounding, we're a challenged society, and we all try to do the best we can, right, in this society. But when you start to wake up, like as a European, and you look at the racist systems that we've created, and it's just so wrong, and that weighs on people, and I think people are trying to find their tribe, trying to find their who are they connected to, and so we get into these I'm an ex political party, we rally around that, or no, I'm I'm an artist. And I get together, when I was a young kid, I was into my 20, we were into the punk rock movement, and so we would get together, and that was our unifying theme. And if anybody came and started talking about disco or heavy metal, it was forget it, So the vegans have created their own kind of connection, their own community. So vegans, a lot of their friends they look for vegans where they're vegans. So those are their new family. If their family eats meat, they don't like them as much, sometimes, or so they've so wrapped up into their identity. So basically, when I share that chemicals, not cows, are what's killing the planet, it's triggering for them. It's like talking to a white person, who denies racism. And you start saying, do you understand, what this means, driving while black? You get a chance, you're going to get pulled over. We have no idea when we're white, right? But if you're black, driving it's a very tough situation for them in the wrong communities, right? But you tell to some people that it's really triggering. So vegans get triggered by things that don't fit their thing. And the vegan myths that they believe is that cows are bad, that chemicals are a necessary evil if we can get rid of if we can have less, if we can go to get rid of eating meat, it's okay to have chemicals, and that eating meat causes heart disease and cancer, and it's very bad for you. And the other thing I find is some people who are vegans, they ate a really, really bad diet. They are eating junk food. So they gave up all that junk food and went to a more, diet with more, vegetables and grains and fruits and nuts, and didn't eat all the trans fats. They got healthier, right? Because they were just eating such a bad diet. But, if they would have incorporated better quality meat, they would have had similar results. But in their mind, they got rid of the meat. That was what the bad thing was.
Because there's a huge difference between eating a burger at, say, McDonald's, as opposed to getting meat from your local butcher, which is grass-fed and humanely raised and all of that, just as far as the quality and the taste.
Yeah, definitely. So
something else there when it comes to, it sounds like what you're talking about is tribalism. And I think that goes back to our tribal roots. Even though we've evolved and we have the internet and cross continental travel and all of this,
Right.
at our core, we're still a tribal people, because if we got out of the tribe or were kicked out, we would die because we needed the community. And so it seems like in some aspect, everyone is searching to find, their people, their group, their tribe, to belong. And so we can now kind of create that on our own. And it doesn't matter if it's local, where we live geographically. It could be, on the other side of the world or the country or wherever, just because of the internet and how much smaller everything has gotten because of that. But then that also breeds division and conflict, and because everyone's looking for something to belong to. And then in order to belong, there's people that don't belong, or you're, forcing them not to. And so it seems like that can lead into kind of the divisiveness that we're seeing in a lot of cultures and societies.
Yeah. It's important for us to remember our humanity and have compassion, even with people we don't agree with. Though some of my friends say, John, you're getting rather intense on that Facebook wall, but when I see that 75% of our winged insects, from moths and butterflies and bees, have disappeared since the 1970s, and around the world.
That's scary.
When I was when I was when I used to first drive my car, I would go up and down, central California through agricultural areas, and my windshield be full of bugs. Just do the bug test, and the bugs are not there now when I drive.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So we're now losing 1% to 2% a year.
Wow.
1% a year, which means by 2030 or 2035, we will reach what I call like the end or peak nature, where bugs and insects, and guess what eats insects is birds.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially by within 1 to 2 decades, there'll be virtually, at our current rate, there'll be virtually no insects, no birds, and no plankton in the ocean, because the ocean we've lost over 50% of all the plankton in the ocean. It's the majority of the oxygen, and we're losing 1% of plankton every day. Every year. We've lost 98% of Pacific sardines since 2007, only 14 years ago. 98%, not 50%, 98. And they're the basis for feeding for the whales and everything, either eats sardines or eats what sardines eat,
Right.
So we are at the precipice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sometimes I get frustrated when people are confronted with that statistics and they still say, I think Impossible Burger is better than eating 100% grass-fed cow. And they're convinced of it. And essentially, I create a graphic in one of my articles, which you may have read, Make America Rivers Blue Again.
Yeah. Great article.
That basically a 100% pasture, from beef burger is really plant-based, because everything that's feeding that cow is essentially grass, which is plants, and it's powered by sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
It's sunlight-powered plants. And the cow eats it, converts it into protein, and we eat that protein. Whereas the Impossible Burger is a chemical burger. It's essentially taking plants that are grown, such as GMO soy, using chemicals and other chemicals, and then it's processed with chemicals. It's extracted. Like every GMO seed sold in America is dipped in neonic. Neonic is an insecticide that's multiple times more toxic than glyphosate. And it then expresses itself. It's done to protect the seed from planting. And it's very hard to even buy seeds for farmers that's not dipped in neonic. And it's the leading killer of bees, because it expresses itself through every cell in the plant.
Wow.
And then the dew in the morning on the corn tassels, the bees will drink that water and absorb that neonic, and then they're dying. So the very basis of the Impossible Burger is killing life. So vegans want to ingest the very basis of destroying the planet, and that's what's triggering for them. And what they say is like, a lot of them will say, "Oh, I never eat Impossible Burger. I just want organic." But that's like a white person going, "I don't hate black people, but I live in a system that appoints politicians that that discriminates against people of color that don't look like me. So I'm okay. I'm not a racist. You know, but then you can't get a loan, because of the color of your skin, or you can't get a job, or you're discriminated against when you go to something, I'm really also trying to work on myself personally to help people of color more, because I feel like I was blessed to grow up in a family that didn't had access to food, had access to art and learning, and so, like, I'm working on a project in St. Louis right now where we're going to build a basketball court in a very poor area, where I found out that the parks closed 3 of the basketball courts in North St. Louis. So, but there's really this disconnect in the vegan community. Like, I ask people, how many vegans or vegetarians have reached out, that are well-known, influencers or investors have reached out and wrote articles saying Impossible Burger is not good. We should be doing certified organic, or we should be doing, they don't do that. They think it's good. That's great. Well, it's better than meat. So like, you can say, oh yeah, well, I'm the organic vegan, I don't believe in all that, but your movement is,
Yeah.
So you can see the challenges that we're facing, and they just increasing. I mean, they actually, the United Nations is putting out documents saying the Impossible Burger is good. The person who led the climate negotiations in Paris now is on the board of directors of Impossible Burger.
Wow. John, so, we've talked a lot about the problems. And I think as a society, we're becoming a lot more aware of that. But where's the solution? Because a lot of these problems and the issues here, they're coming from the top down, because there's monetary incentives.
Right.
We're talking huge multinational corporations that are very much monetarily incentivized, and some of them are publicly traded. So in a sense, we're all incentivized for them to grow, especially if they're in our 401k, or, within our mutual funds or whatever, or have invested that way. So we're all kind of tied into that. But how do you make those change on a micro level? Because something like this kind of has to start grassroots and work its way up, because I don't think it's going to start from the top down, because currently there does not seem to be enough financial incentive for that to happen. Or maybe there is, and I'm just missing it.
Yeah, it's a combination. Things are starting, companies are looking to make some changes, but also as individuals. And as more individuals make that change, that's a signal to the marketplace. But it's a bunch of different things. The simplest thing that we could do is just grow a little food. Like, if you have a balcony, you can grow basil.
Mm-hmm.
You can grow, cilantro. You can grow parsley. Just grow a few little things. If you have some more, like, plant a couple fruit trees. So start right at your house. Compost. Don't throw your banana peels in the trash. Like, I'd ask everyone who's listening to this podcast, how many of your banana peels and avocado pits are going into the landfill? Mm. And if they are, do we feed the earthworms or not? That's a big thing. Do we feed the earthworms or not? So the food that you buy, is that going to feed earthworms? Is it grown in a more regenerative organic matter? Impossible Burger is not feeding the earthworms. 100%, buying, organic. If you're a vegan, buying organic mung beans or garbanzo beans or whatever. That's a way that you can do that. So starting in your home, being healthy. One thing I recommend is doing the plank. I'm a big fan of the plank. And I literally, from a stressed out CEO that looked around and said, God, I've never in my life been overweight. I had payroll of 120 people, great people on my team, and so I started doing the plank. That really is a great way. And it's helped me be a better athlete and be in better shape. Just doing it for 15, 20 seconds a day. So focusing on your health, and your family and your friends, just doing that alone. And show by example. Don't necessarily need to preach. You and I we're communicator, educator, leaders. So, but what are you doing in your own life? That's really important. And then how can you help your community? Could your school, if you have kids, could they do a fruit tree orchard? Could they do a garden there?
Yeah, that's great information as far as just on the very much the micro level, and individually. What about increasing that at scale? So when we're talking about regenerative agriculture or composting, because I feel like those kind of tie in together. And I've had a compost bin and had that like in our garden outside for years and years. And so I think there's a huge potential there where people could do it, and maybe even like a community compost or something like that. Have you given any thought to that, or are there any initiatives surrounding uh, things in that nature?
In the 1990s, that was called the compost man.
Ah,
So I set up home composting programs all over the United States. I drove the state of Florida twice up and down. I know you're
mhm.
down in near the Florida area.
Yeah,
And I wrote a book called Backyard Composting. You can buy it. You can buy it on Amazon used.
cool.
Backyard Composting: Your Complete Guide to Recycling Yard Clippings. Smaller scale composting, you can do at your home, and there have larger scale composting. Like some farms compost. So there's definitely opportunity there. It's not as easy to do mid scale because of some rules and regulations. Unfortunately, it's easier to spray farm chemicals than to get a permit to do a compost facility. So we'll figure that. Uh, the other thing is if you have a 401k or you invest, can you shift that to make sure Monsanto's not in your, or pharmaceutical companies are not in your 401k? Can you connect with the local farmer? Could you loan them $500? Could you, like farmers need help. It's not very profitable farming unless it's large scale. So how can you help your local farmer? Can you go into the supermarket or natural food store and write a note and ask them to bring in more of the foods that you like? Go to a farmer's market instead of just a supermarket. There's so many farmers markets. And maybe you can learn. Take your kids into nature. Go spend some time and go onto a farm, walk around, spend more time in nature, and realize that it's that what we do impacts the world. Each one of us are one out of 7 billion.
Hmm.
Uh, if we could get 500,000 people who are really hardcore focused on regenerative ag in the next 5 years, that would change the country. Right now, I think we have maybe 50,000.
Yeah.
But that's better than we had 5 years ago. We didn't have that. We maybe only had 500 or 1,000. And now we have 50,000. So we just need to keep, and soil health. And it brings together Trump country, blue and red state. A lot of the farmers and ranchers, are have different political views, different than mine, but we come together around soil health and around better food. And then the funny thing is, I find that we actually have more in common than Fox News.
Funny how that happens, huh?
Would tell me. It's like I had all these. I'll tell you a story. I had all these ranchers, and we were talking about the importance of leadership, and one of them said, "Yeah," he said, women. They can sometimes be better ranch managers than all the men. And I was like, this is great. And we were at a restaurant that was a Latino, had the restaurant there. And he came and talked a little about his struggles. And, he'd taken we made a regenerative pizza from some of the local grain that we'd grown. A month later, this guy's having a hunting event, and he brings out this guy and he's made a whole mole, a natural, catering. So, and so, we just need to we just need to show up and do the best we can, and make a better world, right? I mean, that's what you're trying to do, and a lot of people are, and we're not perfect. We just do what we can.
That's the goal. You mentioned farmers markets a couple minutes ago, and something that I'm seeing in a lot of farmers markets, where we're seeing, and traditionally, I think that farmers markets kind of sprang up supporting like your local farmers and smaller agriculture, and a lot of organic, or better than organic. But what I'm seeing now is when you start talking to them, there's a lot of greenwashing going on, where okay, it's local, it's a small endeavor, but they're still spraying. They're putting pesticides on things, Roundup and whatnot, and everything else. So I think you got to be careful there too, because anytime a movement gains traction and popularity, it'll be co-opted by people that just want to hop on the bandwagon for monetary purposes, but not for the greater reason for doing it.
Yeah. Not all food at farmers markets is grown organically or in a regenerative way. So you want to ask questions, but sometimes you'll have farmers that maybe use some chemicals, but they're using less than, let's say, that there are at your local Publix or Safeway or Kroger.
Sure.
So you just want to ask questions and do the best you can there.
Got it. One other thing regarding composting, have you seen there was a Kickstarter campaign recently by the Pella cases, the Pella, the compostable cell phone cases. I actually have one on my phone right now. But they just did a Kickstarter to create home composting units that I think they're launching this fall. And so it's like a small unit that sits on your counter, and you put all your scraps and compost and everything in, and it compacts it down. And it's supposed to increase the speed in which it actually creates compost and put on your soil or as fertilizer or whatnot.
I haven't seen that, but that sounds great. I mean, the simple thing with composting, you can just dig a hole if you don't have raccoons, which I have raccoons, so where I live. But if you don't have raccoons or those kind of burrowing animals, you can just dig a hole in your backyard, have a pile of leaves, throw the compostables, material, organic matter, and then put some leaves over it. And then next time come out and do that. And then, after a year it's filled up. And then you could plant something right there because it'll grow very well.
Yeah, that's a good point. John, what is the biggest life lesson that nature and the outdoors has taught you over the years?
That's a great question. I just think I get so much enjoyment from nature. Like I can spend literally minutes, can go by just looking at bees on flowers or watching hummingbirds. So, that I feel connected when when I'm around nature, and I feel at peace, and I feel the beauty. And that's to me is what I love about nature.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite outdoor activity that you like to pursue?
My favorite activity is walking different places in nature, and then swimming in lakes.
Yeah, that's great.
How about you?
Anything in the great outdoors, hunting, backpacking, camping, those are all some of my favorites.
Yeah.
Just enjoy getting in those wild spaces away from people as much as possible, spending time with family and friends there. And that is one of the missions of our company, is to help people to spend more time in nature, in the wild, and get away from technology so that we can decompress, and it's better for our circadian rhythm and just better for relationships and everything in general.
Yeah, definitely. Two other things I encourage, and I haven't done this though in about a month, so I should be doing this, but is turn off your phone at least once a week for at least half a day.
Digital detox.
Yeah, digital detox, really important. Definitely. I encourage. Well, how often do you do the digital detox?
Yeah, what is that? Right now, it's kind of an impossibility within a growth phase of our company.
Yeah, and with kids and stuff. Yeah. But if you can do it, it's really nice to do it, even if you can do it for 2 hours or 4 hours.
That's going to happen in August. We're doing a backcountry backpacking trip, and there's going to be no cell phone reception anyway. So no internet, no phone calls, no text, no Instagram.
Also, one thing I wanted to mention, I'm working on agroforestry programs where we combine trees and tree crops, mimicking nature. I have projects in Guatemala and also in Malawi, in East Africa, and we're taking areas where it's low productivity, and within 1 to 2 years, producing lots of crops. And so it's a project that I work with.
Oh, great.
And I'm really excited about that. And we're going to really expand that out. One's called Contour Lines Corp.
Okay.
People can find out about it. They have a good YouTube page. And the other one is Permaculture Paradise Institute.
Okay.
And so we can grow so much food. It's a great tool in regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, definitely. We'll link to that in the show notes. John, what brands or companies do you think are doing a really good job of pushing forward this conservation and environmental initiatives like we've been talking about?
There's all sorts of different companies. I mean, there's one in pastured meat called Force of Nature that's really communicating the regenerative message.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bronner's, they've recently come out with a fair trade, vegan chocolate bar. They have great projects. The company I founded, Nutiva, we work a lot around, some of those projects. And then companies even that are maybe not doing it at the level we wanted to do, but like General Mills is committed to 1 million acres, and they're spending millions of dollars to have people teach their farmers how to do a better job.
Wow.
And there's even a company like Cargill, that says that they want 10 million acres by 2030 to use more regenerative practices. And you could argue, well, they're going to do this or that, or this is what they're doing bad, or this is what they're doing good. They're a giant corporation, but these are some of the things that are going on. There's I'm trying to think of what other, there's all sorts of different, there's a new cracker company that's really focused on it. It's not coming to me, their name. There's a company called 12 Tides that I really like. That's a kelp seaweed company, and it's made out in the bag is made from compostable packaging. Really delicious snacks. 12 Tides, there's the companies that are doing certified organic. That's definitely helpful. There's different companies. There's a company that I'm an investor in called Cook's Venture that's transforming the chicken industry. There's Tonka Bar, that's a native-owned company that's transforming, how to make meat snack bars.
Got it.
I'm sure there's a few more, just not coming off,
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good start.
Yeah.
John, is there a book or books that have had a major impact on your life that kind of shaped the way your outlook?
Yeah, several books. I know this sound fun, but sound funny, but the Art of War.
Sun Tzu.
It's a Chinese Sun Tzu. Mists of Avalon was very, very impactful. And The Way of the Weird, WYRD. Yeah.
I'll have to check those out.
And then Paul Hawken, Ecology of Commerce. Okay. So those are 2 business strategy, and then 2 Celtic mythology. That's my grandfather came from Wales at age 8. So I have the Celtic roots, and the Way of the Weird and Mists of Avalon really kind of paint a picture of what life was like, before we became modern human beings back thousands of years ago, that are culturally relevant for people such as myself from Western Europe.
Yeah, great. Do you have a favorite podcast that you enjoy listening to regularly?
I wouldn't say a favorite one. Yeah, I try. I kind of skip around different ones. How about you?
I go back and forth. One that I'm really enjoying listening to right now is Daniel Vitalis' Wild Fed podcast. Are you familiar with that one?
I have. I think I have. I don't know if I've listened to one of them. Yeah. But I'm going to, maybe we'll link there's a couple podcasts we can link on this, right? When you put up my interview, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Happy to put it in the show notes. That'd be great.
Excellent.
John, what is one piece of closing advice that you give to our audience?
Focus on love more than hate. Don't focus on hate.
That's good advice.
And no matter how much you disagree with someone or how bad you think they are, hate, we don't have time for hate. may dislike, but not hate. I think that's really important. And that ties in also to our own healing. Yeah. Because it's hard to heal. It's hard to become a better person if we're focused on hate.
That's good advice. John, where can people learn more about you online and all of the fun projects that you're involved with and, very much needed projects?
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are my 3 platforms. And then johnroulac.com as well.
Okay. And what about the other projects you're involved with? Want to give a plug for any of those?
Great Plains, regen.com. There's the conservation or Contour Lines Corp there in Guatemala, Permaculture Paradise. I mean, there's a bunch of different programs and projects, but those are some of them. Nutiva.com, the company that I founded. I'm no longer CEO, but still they're doing great work out there. And and then Soil for Climate is also a good resource to learn about regenerative agriculture as well. And Kiss the Ground.
Sure.
KissTheGroundMovie.com and KissTheGround.org, the nonprofit.
Great. Well, be sure to include these in the show notes so our audience can check these out and learn more and hopefully get involved with some of these conservation efforts to help protect our planet and our world and become better people all around.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for having me on and wishing you have a great summer and adventures with your new enterprise.
Indeed. Thanks, John.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Rewild Gear Podcast. You can check out the show notes for today's episode at rewildgearpodcast.com. If you're ready to spend more time in the wild, our line of high-quality, minimalistic outdoor gear can help you do just that. Check us out at rewildgear.com.